All right, good evening, everybody. It is 6 p.m. It is Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We do have our full board here present this evening. This is the Town of Spencer regular board meeting for the month of February. With that, we will have Mr. Morgan give our invocation.
May we bow our heads, please? Heavenly Father, we come before you today in humility and faith. We thank you for all you have given us and the many blessings in our lives. We ask for your guidance and strength. Show us the way and fill us with courage and wisdom. Help us to remember your love and grace and to be faithful in our service to you. Give us patience and understanding to face life's challenges with grace. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, board, you have your agenda before you, and now is an opportunity to make any additions or deletions prior to adoption. And I do believe staff has one request for an addition to the agenda. Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. We do have one additional item we request you to add to the agenda tonight related to a budget amendment so we can make an additional police vehicle purchase. And I don't know if you want more information now or later, but that would be the request.
All right. So, board, I would recommend that we add that as item 12 to the agenda. Is the board agreeable?
Yeah.
All right. Hearing so, is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
It's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Mr. Morgan. All in favor? All right. All opposed? And the agenda is approved unanimously. All right. So the next item, we have several recognitions to make, including our second quarter students of the quarter for our area schools, and then a special recognition for our Super Bowl participant, Javon Hargrave. So I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem.
Hi. As all of you know, I love to recognize students who are contributing to both their schools and their communities and their families. And I've got two students of second quarter. DJ Ambers from North Rowan Elementary School. He was nominated because he's always very respectful, prepared every day, helps his classmates, reliable, and does errands for teachers. He's a great asset to the class, and he was nominated by his teacher, Mrs. Trexler. And at North Rowan High School, Kim Yon Oglesby was nominated. His nominator said he was a good, well-rounded student, an athlete, but academics come first, inquisitive, polite, follows directions, and shows a clear desire to achieve. Now, as I was reading those, I couldn't help but think every one of those things could also be said about our 2011 North Rowan High School graduate, Javon Hargrave. He went through the North Rowan schools all 12 years and was just you never heard anything negative about him. Not only was he a great athlete and still is, obviously, he was also a great student and a great team player. One thing that Javon said about himself and how he got where he was, and he didn't say it in a bragging way because he's always very humble. He said that he has always kind of thought he was an underdog. Now, I don't know how he thought he was an underdog because he was a huge fella even in elementary school, but he knew he had to work hard, and he knew he wasn't going to get where he needed to get to unless he did work hard. He put in a lot of work. He put in a lot of work after high school graduation before he went to South Carolina State, and of course he went on to achieve and excel there. He said that his dedication and consistency, and he always has a plan. So young people who are out there listening, you need to follow that wise advice. Stick to what you plan to do. Don't let someone tell you you can't make it. I mean, Javon dreamed of being in the NFL when he was a young man, and he made it, and he made it big time. And most of you that saw the game on Sunday night would agree with that. He didn't bring home the ring this time, but I bet he'll get a Super Bowl ring one of these days. He's always humble, hardworking, and he's in tandem. All those qualities with his talents are going to take him far. We are so proud of you, Javon, and know we will see even more greatness from you. Thank you for being such an inspiration, not only to kids, but to adults too, and such a wonderful role model. And hopefully when he's in town, we can invite him here.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. And do we have any other recognitions from the board? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I wanted to give a recognition to the folks who are making it possible for Spencer to have a lunch program for seniors back here in town. Susan Morris and Beth Nance, who have opened the facility, but also Lefty Home Senior Center, and especially Linda Hurd, who is there each day to serve those who come to enjoy a hot lunch. The center is serving lunch Monday through Friday from 10:30 until 11:30 to seniors 60 and older. You can stop in and register or call 704-431-7720 to make your reservation a day in advance. I've left some brochures and the newsletter from Rusty Homes on the table up front. So please, if you're interested and would like to take a look, take one with you, and hope you'll come and take part of the nutritious hot lunch available 7 days a week, 6 days, 5 days a week, all those other days. There at the Senior Center, which is just down the street here.
Thank you, Ms. Sledge. Any other recognitions from the board? Hearing none, I believe we have a staff recognition to make. We have a new staff member.
Well, we do. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so on the other side of the dais is Anna Canode. Anna is our new town clerk, and her first day was yesterday, so that makes today her second day. We're really thrilled to have her join the team, and she's off to a great start. And of course, Tammy, who has been working with us as interim town clerk, is also a great trainer of clerks, and she's going to be staying to help get Anna up to speed as well. Anna, I don't know if you'd like to say anything. You're welcome to if you'd like to.
Sure. I guess I'll just introduce myself. Like Peter said, I'm Anna Snowd, and I'm very happy to be here with you all and jumping right into the out of the frying pan and into the fire here.
Great. We're thrilled to have you. Welcome aboard. All right, we will move on to public comment. Have we had anyone sign up for public comment? Okay. So with that, do we have any written correspondence?
No.
Okay. All right, hearing none. We will move on to our consent agenda. Board, you have before you the items on your consent agenda. There are 5 items on that. And unless there is a need to pull any of those items, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve it. Second.
So motion by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Morgan. All in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, consent agenda is approved unanimously. All right, we will now move to item 8 in our agenda, and that is a public hearing for financing of a fire truck and a garbage truck. That financing would be through the United States Department of Agriculture and the Rural Development Division. Mr. Franzese.
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight the request is to hold a public hearing. We are not at the point of actually entering into the financing, but this is one of the steps that's needed in order for the USDA to provide us with a notice of conditions that at that point you would be able to consider and adopt, and that's what would move us towards proceeding with the financing. But the idea is that we do have the fire truck and the garbage truck that have been ordered, and the USDA has a loan program that we are eligible for that provides an excellent opportunity for us to finance these pieces of equipment. For the fire truck, after making an initial down payment that's in our budget this year, there would be $690,000 financed over a 20-year term at a 3.75% interest rate. The annual loan payment for that would be about $49,000. And there would also be a debt service reserve until of about $5,000 a year until the reserve account reaches the amount of one annual installment payment. For the garbage truck, it would be a 10-year financing of about $291,000 at the same interest rate, about 3.75% annual payments in the neighborhood of $35,000. Part of the process we've done so far is homework to demonstrate to the USDA what the local financing market would look like for similar products, and we received 3 or 4 responses that were provided that were all either that they aren't able to or did not have terms that were as favorable as this. Of course, this is the same program we use for the financing for this Town Hall and Police Department project.
Okay, any questions from the board at this point?
I guess we're okay with borrowing all this money and financially. I guess everybody's checked behind everything else. You know, it's a shame we need all these things. It's a shame they all come at the same time. Plus, this building pays for this building.
If you recall, besides the building, our debt service is actually very, very low as a town comparatively to a lot of other municipalities. And part of that is we do have such a good fund balance as well. And if you remember from our audit, as well as hearing from Mr. Softly, our borrowing capacity is very, very strong right now. And so, you know, at least my take on it is we are better off borrowing at those low interest rates.
I agree.
And freeing up other funding for other town needs along the way. So I think they've outlined a pretty good program. USDA has been good to work with, especially with this facility.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add, Mr. Francis, to that?
No, I think you've summed it up well.
All right, anything else? All right, so at this time we will officially open the public hearing. And do we have anyone here this evening that is here to speak for the public hearing on this matter? All right. Seeing none, have we received any written correspondence? Okay. All right, with that in mind, is there a motion from the board to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
All right, there is a motion from Ms. Sledge. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Howe. All in favor? All opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. All right, the next item on our agenda is for the town clerk to present a certificate of sufficiency for the proposed annexation on Willow Creek Drive. We have received that certificate of sufficiency, but I'm going to invite Mr. Blunt forward to give us an update on that.
I thought you were going to let your new clerk do that.
We're going to let you set the stage for us.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, as I mentioned at your last meeting, there are certain legislated or required steps in the annexation process. The first one was for you to ask your clerk to investigate the sufficiency of the annexation petition that had been provided by the property owners. She has now investigated that, and there are a list of things that she has to look into, such as proper signature for the property owners, a legal definition of the property, a survey map, et cetera, et cetera. I believe the clerk has accomplished that, and I'll let her speak to that at this time.
So Miss Hatley, Kim Hatley, actually did most of this ahead of time, and then she briefed me about it. So she went ahead and made sure, you know, that the trustees and the owners, everything was good with them, and we have those signatures, and made sure with the border that everything was fine. So yes, I went ahead and sealed this, and everything is in order.
Okay, so board, you do have before you a certificate of sufficiency from the clerk indicating the 8 items that have been investigated and shown to meet the statute for annexation. Yeah. All right. So with that, is there a motion from the board to accept the certificate of sufficiency?
I move to accept the certificate of sufficiency.
All right, the motion by Ms. Sledge, second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, and that is accepted unanimously. All right, and we will now receive a presentation from staff on the proposed annexation and rezoning of the parcel in Willow Creek Drive, as well as to consider adopting a resolution to set a public hearing date. Mr. Blunt.
So as stated, the next step in the process is to set a public hearing to receive comment concerning the annexation. We have advertised that, and we have sent out letters to the contiguous property owners to notify them of the public hearing. Before you are asked to set that public hearing, though, I thought you might know what you were setting the public hearing for. So this is our first public announcement of this project, and you'll see a lot of information, and I'll give some more to the newspaper before we leave. So this is parcel, read one of these monitors. Parcel 051070. It's on Willow Creek Drive, which is an access road that runs north from Longs Ferry Road up the east side of I-85, almost to the river. It is currently partially in our ETJ, and the part that's in our ETJ is zone C85. It's partially outside of our ETJ in Rowan County's zoning control. Their zoning classification is 85 ED-2. I'm going to sort of merge these presentations together, the annexation and the rezoning, because once you annex a property, you have to rezone the part that's not in your jurisdiction. So I'll tell you a lot of stuff all at one time. The requested zoning classification for this property is our industrial classification, light industrial IND, which most of the surrounding property already is. I'm going to show you a series of maps, and these will sort of focus in on where the property is. It's that purple blob in the middle of that picture. We'll get closer and closer as we go along. That's showing it next to I-85, I-85 running up the western boundary of it. A little closer so you can see the surrounding parcels of land that abut this. Another aerial map a little closer so that you can see that most of those properties that surround it are undeveloped. They're in woodlands at this point. There is a residence at the southeast corner. There are a few residential properties north of the property, but separated by a fair amount of woods. The southern properties are long strips of property. Let's go back to this one. You can see that they're long strips of property. The houses are on Longs Ferry Road. So it's the very back piece of their property that's touching this new property. A little harder to see it in that one. This slips over to Google Maps to give you a little clearer view of the property and the surrounding development. This is a nice aerial photography tilted in over Innispec, looking to the southeast to see where the property is, and gives you a nice clear view of where the Longs Ferry Road intersects I-85 to the south of this property. This is looking from the northwest. This is on Willow Creek looking at the property. This is the northern end, the northern entrance to the property now. This is looking from I-85 towards the middle of the property. As you can see, it is a wooded property. Nothing is on the property at this time. Nothing is built on the property at this time. This is looking across from Willow, looking west at Innispec. That's Innispec on the other side of the interstate. This slide, and I'll show it to you again a little later, is meant to impress upon you all of the light industrial development that's going on in this area. We feel this is one of the major reasons to justify changing the zoning for this parcel from C85 to industrial. And that will slip into the annexation questions. This is a site plan, and it changes a little bit every time they work through some problems, but this is the latest site plan that I had. This addresses the economic impact of this development for our community. This is a little over 1 million square feet of developed space in 2 buildings, based on $100 per square foot, which is a number given to me by some developers. That's $100 million in new tax base for the town. Based on Freightliner, which is of similar size, this would relate to 1,500 to 2,000 new jobs for our community. The cost of the town is one aspect of annexation that we always have to address. The beauty of industrial annexations is that it does not include homes. And therefore, when I talk to our department heads, our fire chief, our police chief, and our director of public works, they've all assured me that this will not impact them negatively as far as providing services for our community and for this new development. We have been working with the Millers Ferry Fire Department to find an equitable way for them to provide some of the fire protection for this site. We're still working on the details of that, and it'll be brought back to you in the future to discuss those details. Sometimes we throw out big numbers, and maybe they mean something to you, maybe they don't. I threw in this slide just so you could get a feeling. This is Freightliner out in Cleveland, and it's a little less than 1 million square feet. So you're getting ready to have something bigger than that in Spitzer. The steps of annexation, I've told you about them various times. The petition was submitted. You requested the clerk to check the sufficiency. The clerk tonight reported that the petition was sufficient. You've got a public hearing scheduled for your March 14th meeting. There's also a neighborhood meeting that's scheduled in this room on this Friday, where we'll be meeting with the neighbors that might be concerned about this. Once you've held your public hearing, I will also add that the planning board heard this presentation last night, and they voted unanimously to recommend approval to you as a board. So once you've had your public hearing, you'll have a chance to discuss and debate and grill me for any more information that you need, and then hopefully you'll be ready to vote concerning the annexation and the rezoning. Once it's annexed, assuming you make that decision, then staff has to do a few more things as far as notifying various governmental bodies that we have annexed the property, and that'll fall on Anna and myself. As I mentioned, the rezoning is required since the majority of the property was in Rowan County zoning classification. We have to apply one of our zoning classifications to it. The developer asked that it be zoned industrial, light industrial. Again, there's the property, all that purple color towards the top on the town's official zoning map is zoned industrial, and it is now being developed industrial. So what you had planned for is now happening. This is Rowan County's ED, or 85 ED-2. In its description in their ordinance, it spells out that this would be used for large distribution centers, wholesale operations, and industrial. So this meets, it is a similar zoning classification to what their ED-2 encompasses. The language of Rowan County's zoning ordinance goes on to spell out all the things that are acceptable. This is included in the written material you have in your package, so I'm not going to try to read all that to you, but that would give you the indication that our IND zoning is very similar to Rowan County's ED-2. This is our table of uses, and the two columns that I've highlighted in yellow, the one on the left is our C85, the one on the right is our IND. And I've given you all the pages of our table of uses, again, so you can look at them in your written paperwork. But I will impress upon you that there are some uses that are allowed in the C85 that are not allowed in the IND. Conversely, there are some that are allowed in IND that are not allowed in the C85. But for the most part, most uses are allowed in both. And you can check on that by flipping through and comparing those two columns. There's one that has a lot of uses that are allowed in C85 that are not allowed in IND. Conversely, there's one where there's a lot that are allowed in IND, they're not allowed in the C85. The site is 84 acres roughly. Again, the square footage changes slightly as they try to deal with the two streams that run through the property and adequate buffering and things of that nature. This one shows 1,018,000 square feet of developed space. I think the latest drawing brought it down to 1,012,000. One good thing about changing it to IND is that if it were left C85, there would be no requirement for buffering around this property. Because it's being rezoned to IND and the surrounding properties are zoned either residential or C85, they will be required to provide buffer. They will be required to provide a 40-foot wide buffer, dividing them from other uses. And this map shows you the 40-foot buffer on the northeast and west sides, a continuous 40-foot visual buffer between this plant and surrounding uses. Again, we're back to this one. I just want to emphasize that this area is being developed rapidly with industrial / distribution uses. The red blob at the lower right is Rowan County's Red Rock development, which is going to be industrial / distribution. So it makes sense that this property should be developed in that way. That's why we're suggesting that the IND is the appropriate zoning classification. Again, the rezoning requires that we have a neighborhood meeting, which we'll do this Friday. The planning board has reviewed it and voted unanimously to recommend approval to you. The public hearing will be is scheduled for the 14th and has been properly advertised. Neighbors have been notified. And once the public hearing is held, if you approve the rezoning, then our next step is to advise Rowan County so they can change it in their GIS system. So with that, what we are asking of you tonight is to, again, as a statutory requirement, approve a resolution setting the public hearing for March 14th. And I believe you have that in your package. And other than that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I want to make a couple comments just to add to Mr. Blunt's presentation. First of all, Mr. Blunt, thank you for all the work that you have done. As you can tell, this is a game-changing type of development for our town in a lot of ways, and for northern Rowan County. Potential jobs, potential tax revenue, all of those things. And what I do want to point out is, for those on the board, many of you already know this. For those that are listening, again, we in North Carolina, involuntary annexation is not allowed by law. And so these annexations that we are getting requests from are coming from the developers. They are voluntarily requesting to be annexed into the town of Spencer because of the services we provide, because of the great service our planning department, Mr. Blunt, has provided, making the process smooth and seamless for them. So I want to commend them on that, but also reiterate that these are voluntary requests to become a part of the town of Spencer. The other thing I want to point out is the tax implication for both Rowan County and for the town of Spencer is enormous. If it is indeed $100,000 or $100 million development based on our tax rate, which is comparable to Rowan County's, that would be a tax revenue each year of north of $650,000 of additional tax revenue. And so when you talk about those type of numbers, and then the cost of service is considerably lower for the town than if that were being developed into all residential. we do recognize that houses are going to have to come to support that type of development. But I do want to point that out in the impact. Now, the other impact that it does have, and we do need to acknowledge this, is when a property annexes into a town, that means that the fire tax revenue for the local volunteer fire department within the county goes away. And we are very aware of that. We have actually sat down and met with Millers Ferry Fire Department already to talk through some of their concerns. That meeting was also attended by representatives from Rowan County. And we are working towards what would hopefully be an acceptable agreement to both the Millers Ferry Board, the county, and the Town of Spencer Board that would effectively allow us to provide dual fire coverage for any of the properties that are annexed east of I-85. So that would be on the opposite side of 85. That would effectively allow us to contract with Millers Ferry for a certain amount that we're working through the details that would be presented to the board, but that would be equitable. It wouldn't be the full amount of their tax revenue. It would be a portion of that, but it would allow us to have dual coverage on calls there, and it would allow them to also reap the rewards of that development that happens on that side. And so effectively, nobody's losing in this case. Everybody stands to gain. And I think that's a win-win for everybody. So we'll present more on that as we get more details and as the agreement draft is worked through. But I did want to update the board on that. And that, in turn, really, I think, helps to alleviate the primary concerns of Millers Ferry, as well as the primary concerns of Rowan County for annexing property into the town of Spencer. So with that, are there questions for Mr. Blunt or for myself? Yes, Mr. Miller.
Blunt, what time is this meeting Friday for neighborhood?
It's a good question. I won't say 6 o'clock.
It is the evening.
It is an evening. Again, the neighborhood, the surrounding contiguous properties were notified by letter, first class letter, that we would be holding this meeting.
I believe it's 5:30.
5:30. Okay, thank you.
So 5:30 and then 6 p.m. would on March the 14th at our board meeting would be the public hearing. Yes, Ms. Sledge.
Mr. Blunt, in the information about the zoning from Rowan County, there's some exceptions listed on some things that are not permitted on that property. Are those pretty much the same as what is in our zoning regulation? And
They are
one
very
thing I'm asking about is power distribution and specialty transformers.
They're very similar. Again, since we know what is being proposed for this property, although they are speculative buildings, they could be used for distribution, they could be used for industrial. We are comfortable that some of those that you might be concerned about are not going on these properties. This is prime industrial property, so that's what it's going to get developed for.
Thank you.
Other questions?
But to answer your question, our IND is very close to Rowan County's ED-2. Very close.
Mr. Bowman, would this be a satellite or a contiguous annexation?
Surprisingly, because of the annexation we did last month and the fact that Innospec is going to allow us to annex their 40 acres they just bought this past year, it will end up being a contiguous. Right now it's satellite, but it will be contiguous when we get finished with it. Matter of fact, this creates a bridge to tie all of our properties together. The North Carolina Finishing Company right now is a satellite annexation, but it will become the contiguous annexation.
Other questions? Again, Mr. Blunt, thank you and staff for the
Let me
time.
make one closing comment on this before you set that public hearing. I saw the cash registers going off in your eyes as you were speaking of the tax revenue. I want to remind you that the town adopted an incentive program at the beginning of the year, and that is partly why you're seeing these companies move here. The Johnson Development, Fisher Lamb, will all be seeking incentives at some level because they're all sinking a lot of money into infrastructure to make their projects work. This particular project, they have to run a water line all the way down Willow Creek to get to Longs Ferry. The Johnson Development is running a sewer line all the way down Montclair to connect to the sewer line at the bottom of that hill. So all these projects are putting a lot of money into. Fisher Lamb is going to build an access road that comes from Hackett down to Longspirit. So their incentives are going towards infrastructure that make these projects and other projects a reality. You will definitely get a bump in tax revenue, but don't let the cash registers go to your head too quickly.
We might not pay off the fire truck the first week.
It might take you a year or so. Keep in mind, though, I've impressed upon you, this is 1 million square feet. Those other projects I just mentioned to you, there's another 1 million square feet. So you're getting ready to have the equivalent of 2 freight liners.
And I'll point out, even with the incentive program that the town of Spencer has adopted, it still will, once this is constructed, even with those incentives, will be a significant increase in our tax base regardless. And I'll also point out in those discussions with Miller Ferry, one of the things that we've talked with them about and that they have agreed in principle to, that obviously will have to be approved by their board, would be sharing in that same prorating of the incentives with the contract that we might enter into with them. So, any other questions? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 23-04 to set a public hearing on the question of annexation for the area described for the Willow Creek Drive property to be held at Spencer's Town Hall at 6 p.m. on March the 14th?
I make the motion we do accept this.
All right, motion by Mr. Miller.
Second.
Second by Mr. Howell. All in favor? All right, all opposed? And that is approved unanimously. That hearing is set for March the 14th, 2023. Thank you, Mr. Blunt. And so the next thing you're going to talk about, as we're talking about all this growth, is discussions with our neighboring municipal partners on municipal growth boundary agreements with East Spencer and Salisbury.
So segueing from annexation of a piece of property into annexation in general, about a year ago, 2 of our county's municipalities sort of bumped heads over who had a right to annex a property. They worked that out, and that's behind us. But Rowan County realized that with 9 municipalities, it was probably smart to have all the municipalities try to sit down and agree to some growth boundaries, not to annexation plans, not to plans to grow our town dramatically, but just a line on a map showing which side would go to Spencer, which side would go to East Spencer, or to Salisbury on the western side. So the county invited all of the folks involved in various meetings. Our meeting included, as I say, Rowan County, Salisbury, East Spencer, and Spencer, because we're the ones that have contiguous borders and contiguous ETJs. At that meeting, they shared some maps with us, suggested we meet individually and work out some details, and that is what we have done. This tells you the process of annexation. Since you've gone through it a couple times now, you probably recognize that there are certain statutory requirements that control annexation. As the mayor pointed out, there is no longer anything called involuntary annexation. It has to be voluntary. And the statutes say we can't annex any farther than 3 miles from our contiguous border. So your question about where contiguous was is very important, because our contiguous border just grew dramatically to the east, or will grow dramatically. If the property is closer to another municipality's contiguous border than it is to ours, then for us to annex it, we have to get their permission. So really, the statute draws the line on the map for us. If it's closer to them, it's theirs. If it's closer to us, it's ours. Unless for some reason we didn't want to annex it or they didn't want to annex it, the other municipality could take care of it. The purpose of these growth boundaries is to come to a pre-agreement, something that we can have on paper, written by our wonderful attorney over there, approved by both boards, and then something that we can show to our citizens, to our staff, and to potential developers as to what we have agreed to. There's not going to be a fight over who's going to annex what. It will be determined ahead of time. any kind of agreement between two governments usually has a sunset clause or a clawback clause or reversal clause, and ours will too. And it will basically allow either party to get out of the agreement under certain stipulations. So while this agreement will be a binding agreement for some period of time, either body could get out of it by initiating that process. And usually it's a matter of notification for some period of time, a year or something like that. That slows down the process before you can jump over the hurdle of an agreement that you might not agree with a couple years down the road. Keeps everything at normal pace. And I'll stress again that this growth boundary map that I'm going to show you is not our plan to annex. We don't plan to go this far. Our only incentive to get people to be annexed is that within our ETJ, we have some control over whether they can connect to municipal water and sewer. Without that control, anybody outside of our ETJ has very little incentive to be annexed by the town, except maybe for the case of a large residential subdivision that might grow out there that would like to have municipal services. Or in the case of this one, an industrial facility that wants municipal services and municipal planning. They apparently like my smile. I'll start with the Salisbury-Spencer boundary. And again, I've met with the planner from Salisbury and discussed this issue. She is in agreement with it philosophically. She has to take it to her board to get approval. It will require a slight modification of our ETJ to make sense. This map shows you in very small scale. The black squiggly line down at the bottom is actually the line between our two municipal boundaries. And it runs into Grants Creek and then runs along Grants Creek to the west and then turns north. And it runs along property lines north until it hits 7th Street. And I'm going to show you this in more detail, so don't let this map confuse you. Turns east for about a block, turns north across some property lines, and then takes that beautiful diagonal slash up through the countryside. If you look at that long enough, you recognize that the angle of that slash matches pretty much the angle of our municipal boundaries. And that's how these lines were drawn back in the 70s when ETJs were allowed. You were allowed 1 mile from your existing contiguous border. So somebody took a protractor and drew that line across there. And that's why it is as it is today. This is the lower part of that again, starting at Grants Creek, going along property lines till it hits 7th Street, turning east, turning north with a property line, and then turning diagonally and slashing through the middle of many properties, which makes things awkward for property owners. This is the northern portion, starting with that road, or excuse me, with that line running diagonally up and around to the northern end of Spencer. About midway there, you see where Salisbury's ETJ takes off. And it zigzags along property lines. Good for them, they followed property lines. And then zigzags out and goes west following the rear of properties that face Ridge Road. And that was the logic in that extension. So that's the two existing ETJs, causing some confusion with existing property owners, causing some confusion when trying to draw growth boundaries. So what I suggested to the Salisbury Planning Department and what I would suggest to you is that that be the new ETJ. That is Garrick Road, I believe. This was a suggestion by the mayor at that very first meeting that that be where the boundary would be between the towns. It straightens out our ETJ line between Salisbury and Spencer by giving Salisbury that ETJ at the lower left and giving Spencer Salisbury's ETJ that's to the east of Garrick Road. This line goes all the way up to Ridge Road, although our ETJs don't go that far at this time. In the future, and we've already had some discussions with Rowan County, we want to take that diagonal line, the continuation of that diagonal line, and get it to property lines. And Rowan County is in agreement with the philosophy of let's redraw that line to get it to property lines. And we've already come up with a possible realignment. We'll be working on that and bring it back to you in the future. So with that new ETJ agreed to, and assuming it is agreed to by both bodies, this would become the growth boundaries for Spencer and Salisbury. And as you can see, it goes well beyond our existing ETJs. It goes to Ridge Road. And that, again, is not a plan to annex. Don't want to scare anybody to death that we're going to try to reach out and annex those properties. We cannot annex those properties unless they voluntarily want to be annexed into the town. But this gives an agreement between Salisbury and Spencer as to who gets what side of Garrick Road if at any time we decide to try to annex out that far. So that's Salisbury and Spencer. With East Spencer, this is a copy of one of the maps that Rowan County gave us to get the ball started. Those arc lines out to the east are the 3-mile limit from our contiguous border. And then the line that you see running diagonally, basically from the Longs Ferry Road intersection out, is the line that's determined by who's closest to it, whose contiguous border is closest to those properties. I tried to get as much property as I possibly could. The mayor and the manager convinced me to be a nicer person than that and try to be reasonable in my negotiations. And I argued as long as I could until one day it dawned on me that east of that line that runs to the north, which I've labeled as Spencer's growth limit, is Duke Power's energy production facility. There's not any chance in the world we're ever going to annex that. And what lies south of that dotted line, which I'm suggesting is the proposed dividing line for us instead of the diagonal one that slopes down, is the county's Red Rock development. And the county's not going to let us annex their big industrial park. So really the logic struck home that our line should run to the west of the Duke Energy Facility properties, and it should be divided basically with Longs Ferry Road. Again, a simple division showing where things should be. There was one little problem in all this that I was trying to fix at the same time. And if you see back on the west side of I-85, there's a dotted line that makes a funny little shape running down there, and I'll show it to you in more detail in a minute. Right now, our ETJ between East Spencer and Spencer on the west side of I-85, south of Longs Ferry, along Montclair Drive, is a straight line. And it actually cuts several properties in half. And we've had people come to us and ask us who's going to be in charge of the planning for these properties, you or East Spencer. We've worked that out with East Spencer on a case-by-case basis, no argument between the two municipalities. But I thought as long as we were drawing new lines, it would make sense to change that line to that. And what that does is gives us zoning and subdivision control of the properties all the way to the end of Montclair. East Spencer agreed to that. East Spencer's board has approved this, so they're ahead of us on this project. And what they're agreeing to is those growth boundaries. The light green is what I'm proposing for Spencer. Again, it goes to a vertical line there that divides us from Duke Energy's properties. It runs along Longs Ferry Road, except for that dip down Montclair. And then East Spencer wanted to push their boundary out a little farther, and that's entirely up to them. That's between them and Rowan County. Again, they can't annex anything unless they are asked to annex. It has to be voluntary. So there would have to be some reason for somebody outside of their ETJ to want to be annexed before annexation can take place. Quite honestly, and I'll be presenting this to you in March at your planning retreat, we're about out of ETJ on this side of the town. So we're not going to be seeing much more annexation on this side, except for the properties we've already identified. So that is the agreement that has been approved by the East Spencer board, basically a concept drawing at this level. We will have to put some words to this and a little better map to it, and then fall back on our highly qualified attorney to draft an intergovernmental agreement to define what that is, and we'll bring that back to you for approval. What I'm asking for tonight is for your approval to continue negotiations with both municipalities and then bring an official proposal back to you in the future.
So, thank you, Mr. Blunt. With that, I'll add just a couple of thoughts, and kind of what, as staff has worked through this with staff from neighboring municipalities and with Rowan County staff, and as we've met at the elected official level, one of the things I've tried to reiterate is we, as a town, I know Mr. Blunt said we're, not a lot of ETJ, but there is a lot of ETJ that is still within Spencer that is what would be considered undeveloped. And because of that, we have a lot of potential for future growth and the ability to direct how that growth happens within our existing ETJ. And so it's my firm belief that we need to be leaders in this process. We as a municipality need to be the one that leads by example. And that example is not trying to make this into any type of land grab type of activity. And so that is the reason we tried to rein in Mr. Blunt a little bit, because he was doing his job as our town planner, but also recognizing that we do want to grow, but we want to do that in a controlled manner. We need to grow within our means, and we need to grow while fostering goodwill and better relationships with neighboring municipalities and with Rowan County. So that is really where all of this kind of came from, the result of why we limited the boundaries to where we did. And I'll just say I'm really happy with where we ended up with this, and pleased that other municipalities and the county have been generally agreeable to what we're proposing. So are there any questions for Mr. Blunt at this time?
I do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the agreement between Salisbury and Spencer, where is the Standback Forest? Where is that? Is that on that borderline?
Let's go back to that. So what was your question? I'm sorry.
Where is Standback Forest in relation to the line between Spencer and Salisbury?
It's a little bit to the east, obviously, of the existing municipal boundaries. So it's not affected by the ETJ, and the municipal boundaries are already butting into each other, so there's not going to be any growth by either municipality along that line.
Okay. So that little piece that we're cutting out, and Salisbury is going to get to make
That's at
That's on the
7th
west.
Street Extension and
What is it?
Garrick Road.
it's what?
7th Street Extension, after you go around the curve,
Okay.
at Garrick Road. It would
Okay.
be that corner,
Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure about where that was.
right across from the horse farm.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So the road where my dotted black line starts is 7th Street, 7th Street Extension.
Okay.
It runs over and then turns north on Garrett and runs up Garrett. So this is well north of Grants Creek. So it's on the north side of Grants Creek, way outside of our municipal limits at this time.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I make
Yes,
a comment?
Mr. Moore.
I don't know exactly on what you have on the planning board, and I know it's a shortage of ETJ representatives. And as you know, as vocal as we are trying to be peacemakers and everything else, we need to really stress hard to get some people representing that part, whether it's the planning or I know we have a problem with our community gardens and our community appearance. And so I think that's something we need to stress as a board, that we need to get outside communication with these folks so they'll have a little bit say so to it.
We actually, I think I mentioned it in an earlier meeting, but we sent out a direct mailer to every residential property I could identify that is located in our ETJ, asking people to contact us to serve on our planning board, Board of Adjustment. To date, we have gotten zero response.
Well, the main thing is at least we're trying. You can't say, hey, they're not even concluding us. I want to make
Absolutely.
sure that we do include these new people in.
We
into
want
the
them to
group.
serve, and we're stretching our, to do a direct mailer is a step above and beyond when
Okay.
you're trying to get people to serve.
That's fine. I know you're doing a good job. Mr.
We have advertised it on our website. We have advertised it in other ways in the newspaper. The mayor's notes in our newsletter have stressed it at times. I would love to have some folks step forward. I've contacted a few people personally, people that y'all suggested, and they laughed at me.
I'm sorry that's the
That's
case.
all. But it's a problem everywhere. So it's
So
just
now
not-
we just need to start twisting arms. So if you know folks, ask nicely. If they say no, twist an arm.
But point well made. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Voluntold.
That's right. All right. Anything else for Mr. Blunt?
Mayor,
Thank
if I assume I've got consensus to continue on with that process.
Well, and I would like if the board actually make a formal motion to agree to these annexation or the growth boundaries in principle, and allowing staff then to work out the details for a final proposal.
I make a motion that we let Mr. Blunt proceed with this communication with these two municipalities for future boundaries.
All right. There's a motion from Mr. Miller,
Second.
second from Ms. Sledge. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? All right. All opposed? And that is approved unanimously.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Blunt.
All right, we will move to item 12. That's the item that we added, and that relates to the need for purchase of a new police vehicle.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Granzis.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. I'll ask Chief File if he could approach the lectern, and he'll add in some details. But we have had a challenge, as you've heard many times, about ordering vehicles. You'll recall that earlier this year we amended the budget for the purpose of pre-ordering vehicles that we were wanting to order next fiscal year, so we could get in line for those, which we're still in line. We still don't have a production date on those. We had a vehicle ordered within this year's budget for a light-duty truck for code enforcement, which has since been canceled by the manufacturer, which is another thing that's happening. Not just that you have to wait a long time for vehicles, but then once you order them, they might just cancel the orders. I think we heard about some Greensboro, others having 40 vehicles canceled, I believe. So with all that happening and with our staffing getting back up, we've had to put some spare vehicles back in service, vehicles that are 20 years old plus or minus and are getting long in the tooth. And actually we have our new Sergeant Everett and one that's particularly old and particularly not working very well at the same time. And so this is all to say that we found out this week of an opportunity to get a Dodge Ram pickup similar to what you saw the other evening that had been ordered by another agency, and they canceled their order. So it's now available, and we would like to be able to move ahead with that. And so what you have before you is a budget amendment that adds some funding to the budget to be able to accommodate that. Basically, the funding we had for the canceled light duty pickup would be supplemented by strong sales tax revenues to then allow us to purchase and upfit this vehicle. So, Chief File, if you want to add anything to that.
Said it very well. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Yeah, we definitely, we're still having vehicle issues. I know I spoke to a few of you, and you're aware. I try to be a good steward of the town's money, so I kind of struck gold on this one, I believe. Typically, we cannot obviously get anything less than state contract price. However, this agency defaulted and did not complete their purchase on a vehicle they had ordered. So we got $2,500 under state contract price, which is obviously a significant savings, being that the vehicle is already nearly $20,000 off of what a retail price would be. To be able to get anything less than that is obviously very good. So as Peter spoke about and said, it is replacing, effectively will be replacing a 21-year-old vehicle. So to kind of give you a full perspective, because I know a lot of people think we've got a lot of vehicles, and we have. We were in a significant hole, and I know most of you are aware of that. So this will allow us to replace one of the oldest ones we have. However, I will tell you, it still leaves in full-time service a 21-year-old, a 12-year-old, one that's got 100,000 miles on it, and in part-time service, our vehicles respectfully are 13, 17, and 19 years old. So obviously, the goal always for most organizations has been a 8-year or 80,000 mile target. That's kind of what we like to see as far as fleet management, and that saves us down the road. Now, we've been very fortunate in one aspect that we've been short-staffed because we haven't been running these old vehicles. Now, as we're bringing our staffing level back up, we're pushing these back into service. So every time we push one back in, we're going to have continual problems, I'm afraid. So we kind of struck gold on this when I told the dealership to be on, call me first. I don't know how many else told them that, but I told them to call me first. They had a cancellation, and they actually called me on Monday and said, this agency didn't pick it up. Do you want it? And I said, I can't make that decision yet, but please give me till Wednesday. So, and unfortunately, they did cancel the code truck. That's been an ongoing problem with ordering vehicles. Agencies are being plagued by that, whether it's code enforcement, law enforcement, or just general governmental vehicles where they're not able to produce enough. So that's why we're having to order so far in advance. So we're kind of a really good spot now to have one that's sitting on the lot waiting for us, and it is the only one they have.
So you're saying the vehicle manufacturers make a lot more money on retail.
We probably shouldn't
vehicles.
say that, but
It's true.
they give a lot of good concessions to government, and I will say that. We're glad
That's
they
not
do
where
that,
they make
but,
their money.
Yeah.
I do have one question for you. How much arm twisting did you have to do to get them to cancel the order?
Yes. We need to get them to cancel a couple more.
Questions from the board?
How soon would this be able to be put in service?
Well, we'll have to order parts for it, the upfit parts. As far as getting the vehicle, if the board chooses to allow this evening, we will confirm it with them tomorrow. The vehicle's sitting on the lot, so we'll be able to get the vehicle fairly quickly. I know there's going to be a little bit of delay. We had a pretty significant delay on getting the other 3 trucks upfitted. We're at that good spot with that same upfitter that worked for us this past time. They have, I believe, 40 cars coming in the month of March. So if we can get a vehicle to them before the month of March, very likely they can go ahead and sneak us in there. So they did us really good on getting the first 2 of these trucks upfitted. They're also currently working on Joel's Public Works trucks. So they kind of snuck us in there in their downtime. So that's helping us out also. Anytime they've got downtime and sneak us in there, I think we're getting a little better deal. So we've been able to negotiate about $300 or $400 off per vehicle with them also. So trying to save where we can, but keep them busy and get in the spots where they have openings for us.
I will remind the board that was one of the things several of us, I think, really stressed a few years ago was getting on an active fleet management rotation so that we weren't having to buy all new vehicles all at once. And so I think this is just another step. We've got to be creative now with the way that the market is and the availability and pricing and everything like that. So if I think it's, again, if we've got an opportunity to make hay, we should do it while we can. Other questions? All right. With that, then, is there a motion to adopt the police vehicle budget ordinance amendment? And that would be ordinance 23-03.
I move that we approve budget ordinance amendment 23-03.
Motion by Mr. Morgan.
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? All right. All opposed? And that is approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Call him right now.
Call the man.
All right, the next item is to consider amending the Town of Spencer Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual, Articles 4 and 5.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. These are some slight changes we are recommending. As a reminder, the personnel policy for the town that we're using was adopted about 2 years ago. We made one amendment last year, and now we have amendments to 2 articles that we're recommending in order to align with best practices and improve our ability to recruit and retain talent. The two changes are, I'll go one at a time. The first is an amendment to Section 14 of Article 4, which would clarify that sworn law enforcement officers appointed as a lateral transfer who already hold a general certification with the state would serve the same 6-month probationary period as all other staff. The 12-month probation listed in the original version was intended only for newly or first-time sworn officers. And the other recommendation is to amend Section 12 of Article 5, which would give the Board of Aldermen the ability to establish the annual safety shoe allowance amount through our budget process rather than stating a dollar amount in the personnel policy. This will allow the town to keep the program consistent with market trends and peer organizations. So, for example, our personnel policy currently stipulates that the boot allowance is $100. And we're finding that that's not able to cover the boots in the same way that it used to. And so we recommend taking the dollar amounts out of the personnel policy and simply providing that we establish it each year through the budget process.
All right. Other questions from the board?
How do you find out about all this information about? I know you're just kind of compete with other police departments around the county. How do you find out?
In terms of
The price increases.
the boot allowance,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we're hearing it from staff. They're going buying boots and knowing that it's not covering. And we also asked staff to do a survey of other jurisdictions, and they did some research to show us what others were doing. So we'll have more information about that through the budget process. But we do think it's a best practice to keep the dollars part of it out of the personnel policy.
I might mention too that Central Carolina Council has done a comparative study of wages in the region as well.
Other questions? All right, hearing none. Is there a motion to amend the Town of Spencer Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual, Articles 4 and 5 as presented tonight?
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem. Second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All opposed? And that is approved unanimously. All right. Next item is to consider approving a change to the classification and compensation system to amend the following classifications: police officer, police school resource officer, police corporal, police detective, police sergeant, and adopting an associated budget amendment. Mr. Granzis.
Thank you again, Mayor and members of the board. What we're requesting this evening is a 2-grade adjustment to the classifications mentioned in order to stay competitive in our local and regional market for these public safety positions. We've made a long stride in this area over the last few years. Our pay plan we're operating off has generally done a good job, but we have found that we have gone back to the bottom of the ladder in terms of starting pay for police positions, and so therefore we want to be able to stay competitive proactively with our staff and be able to recruit new staff as needed, and therefore we are recommending a 2-grade adjustment to all of these classifications. And for example, changing the police officer from grade 14 to grade 16 would increase the annual minimum pay from $39,421 to $43,461 per year. We would also recommend a corresponding 10% increase to the pay rates of each staff in one of these classifications effective yesterday, February 13th, which is the beginning of the pay period.
All right. I want to point out a couple things based on the information in your agenda packet that I think are very telling. Again, if you recall, several years ago, we did a class and compensation study for all of our staff and set those. And of course, I think as municipalities, we play leapfrog with one another in a competitive job market. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing on the police side, leapfrogging where other municipalities are getting ahead of us. And I think for us to attract and retain the best talent throughout each of our departments, it's essential that we continually reevaluate this and that we're keeping up with the market. And in some cases, trying to stay one step ahead. I want to point out there's some information in there about the cost to onboard a new officer, and that is a significant impact per officer. To send someone through DLET is in the order of $26,000 to $29,000. A lateral police transfer, that financial impact is $12,000 to $15,000. So it is essential that when we get someone in, that when we get that good talent in, that we're finding ways to keep them here as a part of our team in Spencer. And so I think, you look at the cost for a single person with the recruiting cost, the overall cost of what we're looking at on an annual basis to increase this is it's a good insurance policy. Are there questions from the board for Mr. Franzese?
Does this create, I know from my time when teaching, I think the last year or two I was in when the General Assembly raised significantly the base pay. Beginning teachers are going to be making more than I was making as a 7-year teacher. That wasn't much incentive to stay. Newsflash, just in case you didn't catch that. Does that create a situation here where we raise people and then we're actually paying, and look, we definitely should do this, but we're paying the new folks more than folks who have been here and doing a good job already making, because we want to definitely avoid that.
It's compression.
Yeah.
And that's the reason for the recommendation of the 10% adjustment to those currently. So no, we're trying to avoid that situation.
Good.
That's good.
Other questions? I'll point out that as a town, we're in really good financial shape this year. We are very, very blessed with tax revenue coming in from sales tax and other means that are above what was originally budgeted. And if we keep doing what we're doing, I see that continuing into the future. We just talked about some of that earlier this evening with some of the growth and development. So again, for us to be able to invest in our staff and make sure that we are attracting and retaining the best staff out there, I think is really, really important. So I appreciate the board's consideration of this, and I will entertain a motion if there are no other questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I sat in on meeting with the League of Municipalities earlier this week, and there is a legislative, there is something legislative that is going to be introduced, they think, to take 6% of the sales tax and redirect that to the roads, to the highway. So, it's not going to become part of the Powell bill, because that was the question I asked, is this going to affect Powell bill? And they said no, that this would go into a general highway fund. But, we may be looking at some changes to the amount of sales tax that we are receiving.
Just good to know. Thank you. Other comments, questions? All right. Is there a motion from the board?
Move we do this as presented.
Second.
All right. There is a motion from Mr. Howe, second from Mr. Miller. All in favor? All right. All opposed? And that is approved unanimously. All right. Thank you very much, and again, thank you for bringing it to our attention and helping make sure that we're staying ahead of the curve.
And certainly appreciate our staff across the board, and in particular being able to find out when we need to address things. And one thing I'll say is, of course, we're talking about one portion of our staff here, and as we proceed, we do want to make sure that we are doing the same with all our staff. Absolutely.
How soon will this pay increase start?
Well, we will make it effective yesterday.
Okay,
so
that's good.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to do.
It'll be reflected immediately.
All right.
Best you can do.
Yeah.
We will move on to departmental reports. Planning, Mr. Blunt.
Mayor, just out of curiosity, was there an agenda item for the park property
if you recall, that was added to consent agenda. So maybe we can take a moment though and
I think you've got a newspaper report.
and recognize. Well, we also have folks from the
Foundation.
museum committee, and so if maybe you want to just mention that, we can recognize them.
Can we go back to the information that's provided to us in our packet about the acceptance,
About what?
about the acceptance of that town project? I mean, that
From
property.
the consent agenda?
Mm-hmm.
We can.
Can we pull that? I mean, I know it's,
Well,
we can't
we've
pull
already
it.
approved.
We
already
can't pull
approved
it, but
But we can, as part of the planning department report,
Reference
we
it.
can
Right.
we can acknowledge it.
Joe has been handling this, so he could have done a much better job than I presenting this, but I'll wing it. The Yadkin, maybe I should get one of these guys. There's Mr. Bishop. That group owns a piece of property next to the North Carolina finishing property and at the very end of our new Trailhead Park. They have graciously come to the town and offered to donate that piece of property to us as a way of expanding our park project in that area. They have suggested ways that that property could be used as a part of our park, but they're not necessarily tying strings to those ideas. They're leaving it up to the town as long as we incorporate it in our park system and make it a good piece of that park. Mr. Bishop, would you like to say anything else?
I think that covers it pretty well. Our interest is in taking a chunk of land that butts up against a chunk of land you got that you're turning into a park and expanding and being able to use it for public activities, historical interpretation and education, and as just a public space for families and individuals to enjoy walking and picnicking or whatever. So, if you guys are game for that, you got 2.8 acres.
thank you very much.
You might want to go and answer her question.
Okay.
Salisbury Post.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Mayor.
on that note, I think on behalf of the board, myself and the board, we want to just express our sincere appreciation for the work that your group has done over the years and the vision that you have had, and then also for helping the town of Spencer to expand our parks and recreational opportunities. This really plays into this grand vision of redeveloping that area by the river into something that folks want to come and visit and spend time with, and also to interact with the history of that site. It is an incredibly important site historically for a whole lot of reasons, and as y'all have mentioned, for the military significance of it, the trade and economic impact of it over the years, and then also the Native American history, as well as the Spanish exploration. So we're excited about it. Thrilled to have that to add on to our Yadkin River Trailhead and complement our greenway system that we're planning. So thank you for your vision and for your generosity.
And the reason it was moved to the consent agenda at our meeting on Thursday night was because Joe Morris was not going to be able to join us tonight. So we did hear an extensive presentation
Correct.
about it last Thursday. So thank you again.
So you've got to approve that one twice. That's the way to do it.
Thank you very much.
So, Planning Department report. You have a copy of my activities for the month in your agenda package. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Otherwise, I'll be happy to sit down.
I've got to ask.
Yes, sir.
Camping and hunting sites found. Standback Forest. Is that one of your inserts that you make us laugh, or is that for real?
That's true.
Okay.
While my wife and I were walking through the park one Saturday morning, we stumbled across first a hunting site, a tree stand with corn spread out underneath it. And then as we were walking back towards the 8th Street Park, we stumbled across a wide area that had been used for a camp, probably during the summertime. It looked like it had been abandoned for some period of time. And we reported that to our police department and our public works department. I think both of those issues have been resolved. But I'll go walk it again and find out.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Move on to our code enforcement report. Mr. Osborne.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
Board members. You have my report. The only thing I'd like to add to my report is the hearings that I had during the month for 911 2nd Street. I indicated there was a no-show from the owner. I did receive a call, a voicemail from the owners recently, who stated they are also out of the country at the time of the hearing. So I did reach out to them this week to make contact, and haven't heard back from them yet. But I hope to hear back from that. Excuse me. I got a little frog in my throat here. So that's really the only thing I have to add in my report, pending your question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Questions from the board?
I got a question, sir. 314 Northland Avenue. Can you give me a report on that? Because I question what's going on with that house. And see, it's a garage roof with in the backyard sagging and everything else. Who owns that property? Are they trying to do anything with that property?
It's a rental property at this point, and what I understand, there's been trouble with some of the renters coming and going. The owner hasn't made much attempt to work on the property, so the garage in the back has a serious sag in the ridge line, which is why I attempted to reach out to him and set up a hearing to discuss the potential repair or demolition of that particular piece of property. Primarily the garage, not the house itself. I think the house is salvageable.
Well, it's just a high visibility. You know, it's highly visible from everyone coming down the street and everything else. And I'd really like to see something done with that property.
And I'm hoping that the owner will reach out to me, and so we can discuss what's going to happen in the future with that piece of property, what his plans are. I know that somebody would like to purchase that piece of property if he's willing to sell it, but we got to get to that point where I have him face to face where we talk. So at this point, I haven't had that yet. But thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Next is our police department report. Chief File.
Good evening for a second time.
Good evening.
So I provided the monthly report as is standard. Call volume remains steady. If you will notice, the number of events is up slightly over what it was. So I want to contribute that to my guys' hard work. Obviously, we saw a problem that we've discussed, and we've discussed it in these community forums that we've had. We've had some conversation with some local church members who have brought up some of the same issues. And as I told everybody in our forum in here, we need the citizens to be our eyes and bring issues to us, and we will respond accordingly. So we have nearly 1,500 events this month. You know, a few of the things stayed constant and heavy, like school checks and business checks and park checks. That stayed about on the average. Traffic enforcement has went up significantly. That was an important aspect of this. We talked about how that was going to help reduce crime overall. You see the blue lights on, the bad guys will go elsewhere to cause problems. It has seemed to help. Can't say it's fixed everything 100%, but we have increased traffic enforcement about 400% over what our normal average was. Obviously, that doesn't mean everybody's getting tickets. We always say if you can fix a problem with a warning, fix the problem with a warning. If they need a ticket to resolve it, then they can have a ticket to resolve it and talk to a judge about it. To kind of give you a little bit of an idea, because it's not specifically spelled out on the report here, out of 117 stops this month, 64 resulted in a citation, 24 were written warnings, 29 were verbal warnings. So we're about a 50-50 percentage there as far as that goes. It all depends on what the violation was. Obviously, our late night target is suspicious activity. If they're committing a traffic violation at the same time, they're in the neighborhood where they shouldn't be, and they're doing something suspicious, and we're going to make an investigative stop on it. And that is keeping our crime rate down where it needs to be. So definitely want to thank my officers for their hard work on that. Aside from that, as far as staffing goes, obviously everybody got to meet Detective Sergeant Everett. He is on board with us now, and he has hit the ground running, which we're very thankful for. Our two Billy T cadets are in the process. One is completing his training to be able to sit for the final state test. The other one has completed everything required of us to be able to send his his paperwork up to the state, get his certification back. So that should be sent up by this Friday. We're waiting on one piece of paper from the state, so we'll send that up, and then he will begin his field training process, which will be about 3 to 4 months. So we're looking at sometime in spring or early summer before both of those cadets hit the ground working in their own car and ready to go. But we're very excited about that. We do still have one position open on the road right now that we're looking for, and I thank each one of you for the positive vote of confidence tonight on adjusting the pay rate. I believe that is going to probably open up a flood of candidates that we've not had before. Kind of reiterate, we're kind of bottom of the pack right now, and this will move us to towards the middle or slightly over. I think, unfortunately, other agencies will probably do it to us again and move again, and we understand that. So we're going to keep a watchful eye on it. So hopefully this will get us a flood of candidates to fill that final position and lock in a few of the ones that we have that have been heavily recruited. I will tell you, it's a good sign when your officers are heavily recruited, because it makes me feel good that our guys are looked at across the county and say, we would like to hire Spencer's officers away from them. I don't want them to leave, though, because I don't want to be back where we were. So the 2 or 3 that have had applications put in their hand, I believe that we're going to be just fine. We're going to be okay and hold our own for right now. So. But definitely, I'll answer any questions you may have for me.
Questions, Mr. Miller?
Yes, sir.
In the last 30 days since that incident off 7th Street, have we had any gunshots? Because I've had some neighbors say they've heard some gunshots.
We have. I believe in this reporting period here that went through January 31st, I believe there was 10 noted in there. Obviously, we have not had any new shootings per se, as far as incidents where we've actually went out and worked the crime scene as far as that goes. I will tell you, there's been a few that have been reported to us. I'm okay with people reporting it to us, and I've talked to them on the telephone and told them we appreciate them reporting gunshots to us. We have found a couple of them were fireworks. There was a incident, I guess this past weekend, where we had 2 calls about shots fired, and actually wound up being shots fired over in East Spencer. It was never called in over there. Like, none of their citizens called it in. Fortunately, we had an officer sitting in the Food Line parking lot with his windows down, and he heard the shots fired behind him, but it was called in on our side. So we kind of got dinged for the stat as far as being called in as a shots fired, but it was unfounded on our side. Nobody called it in over there, so I'm assuming there was nothing to it. But it is still occurring, unfortunately. But we're trying to push it out of our borders. And we'll help all the agencies out how we can, but we're trying to take care of our own right now. So if we can push it out, we're going to count that as a win.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, we have Deputy Chief Lewis with us tonight. Chief Lanning had a meeting to attend related to some mutual training exercises that are being planned in the area.
Very good. Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As with PD, calls for service for us have stayed steady as well, with the monthly total of 84. Currently, all of our trucks are in service. Everything seems to be working good. No equipment updates or issues. For our special events, we did have the school system have a career shadow. So we hosted a girl from Carson High School for a few hours who is expressing interest in the fire service. Unfortunately, coffee with the chiefs this morning, 3 calls right through that. So nobody was able to make it to that. Personnel update. Agility and the fireground scenarios were done on the 3rd of February. We did interviews, and we have a tentative start date for March 6th. I believe the offer will be extended tomorrow.
I believe we've done that today.
Did it
or in
go
the
out
process.
today? Okay.
So we should hopefully in the next week or so have a forward momentum on the completing the process there.
Then currently still doing the programming portion for the station edition, and we're still working with TJ DeLuca for the risk review program, which I will reiterate will help with our best practices and risk reduction, and also reduce insurance rates through the league.
Very good.
If anybody has any other questions, I can try.
I was just wondering why y'all stood me up this morning at Bojangles. I couldn't make it today either, so.
I thought about it until I was driving somewhere else.
Yeah, we were chasing the whole town practically this morning for a little while.
How is that going? The Coffee with the Chiefs when we are able to have it. Are we getting a decent turnout?
I'm gonna defer that back to you.
A little bit hit or miss. We've obviously had a little bit of staffing issues from having it the last couple of months. But when we were having it, I believe it's been about 3 months since we've actually had it. That both of us have been able to go together. Usually about half a dozen. So it's kind of hit or miss. We hope for a better turnout, but it's okay. It's still good. It's still good talk, and we still get a little one-on-one time with the citizens. So we definitely going to try to keep doing it.
Yeah, we appreciate you doing it. Those type of things are the things we need to be doing to reach out to folks. So thanks. All right.
They say.
Public Works, Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board.
Good evening.
Just a couple notes from my monthly report. The leaf backs have quit running right now, so they'll pick back up in the middle of March. I think the date is the 14th instead of the 15th. It's just even weeks, however we can even it up. The spring mulch giveaway, the date is April the 15th. It'll be from 7 until 12 o'clock. Delivery will be available just as always. You can call it in, find out whatever, we can get it to you. There will be a rain date if we need it. April tends to be a wet month, so we'll see. The spring cleanup day we have lined up for March the 25th. It will be held for a piece of property, a cemetery. It's actually a cemetery across from Hendricks. Will be a cleanup day there. So if anyone's interested and want to volunteer, let us know. Town Hall, myself, anyone, we'll get you on the list, and we'll go from there. The final sanitation numbers are in. We actually had a decrease this year of 37 tons, a little 37 and a half tons actually. Several years ago, if you remember, we had a big increase when the pandemic hit. Everybody was staying at home, providing, producing more trash at home. So the last 2 years we've actually decreased. This year we didn't decrease quite as much because we've had a kind of an influx of people. We've had a lot of homes remodeled, new homes built. But it's following that pattern of whereas we're coming out of the pandemic, we are decreasing a little bit. So I feel sure that we'll probably hold true to that again going into the next year. Just a quick CCAP update. We had the meeting on Friday with the residents, actually a resident that came to the meeting. But all went well. We had a great meeting with the gentleman, and now we're moving forward with getting the signatures that we need to move forward. So as soon as we get the signatures from the property owners, then we'll be setting that up. Cindy can file for permits once she gets the permits filed, and then we can actually move forward with construction. So if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Just one note for everybody on that event on March the 25th. We had the folks from the AME Zion Church come to us wanting to partner with the town and letting us know about their plans. They want to rehabilitate that cemetery, and they're excited about the possibilities. They want to restore a lot of the gravestones and do a lot of cleanup there, which is great because that will eventually be along the route of our ED 5861 Greenway Bikeway project. And so that's something that they're interested in, and so they came to the town wanting to let us know about their plans and seeing how we could help out as well. And this was something that we thought would be a great opportunity, at least to get them started on some of that cleanup, to be working in that area on March the 25th. So hopefully folks will be able to come and participate and pull weeds and cut branches and things like that. So more to come.
Will that cleanup day be limited to the cemetery property, or will there be other?
It will be limited to the cemetery property this year.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Taylor? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board, you have your finance department report in front of you. Mr. Franzese, anything you want to add to that?
No, sir.
All right. Any questions from the board? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to the library report. They're just making you jump right in, aren't they?
Past month, in January, there were a couple events for the children that involved stories, games, and crafts. The first one focused on penguins, and then later in the month, when we had Chinese New Year, there were events for that. There were adults who visited, to read, research, and study. The circulation numbers are provided in the report. And then in February, there will be an event for the Harlem Renaissance to celebrate Black History Month. That will be on the 21st. And there will be students from 2 local high schools visiting, and there will be a local musician playing an instrument and singing to give the students an opportunity to experience jazz music in line with the Harlem Renaissance. And our Facebook page has over 600 followers now. That's exciting.
Very good. Thank you. Board, do you have any questions? All right. Thank you very much. All right. Town manager report.
Well, thank you again, Mayor and members of the board, for your efforts to help us build our model small town, our model town for all of North Carolina. We've done a lot of exciting things this evening, and we're already looking ahead to next month in our annual planning session and gearing up for next year. I have something I'm going to pass out in just a moment related to that. Before I do that, I will mention, as noted in your report, there's been a lot of tree work in town, courtesy of Duke Energy and their contractors. We've gotten a lot of feedback about that.
I bet you
imagine.
There's
That's the best way to say it. Feedback.
we've gotten some feedback about that. I
It's the
think
cleanest way to say it.
now I'll say there's a distinctive approach that power line tree maintenance crews take when that doesn't necessarily look the way it looks in other situations. But I have asked Joel to take a look at some things and see if we need to express some collective concern to Duke if things are out of line. But I know in generally you look around sometimes and you look at the shape of what remains of a tree around the power line, and it makes you scratch your head. But we are hearing about that, and we're making sure if we have feedback to communicate to Duke, we will.
So you're saying you wouldn't let them give you a haircut, huh?
Not if I was near a power line.
I beat them to it.
Yeah, I want to say something Joel brought up, and this is really important because they're cutting trees right now. And Joel made a comment, some of these crepe myrtles will already start to come out. That's what it's at. They might be destroying some of the trees right now. It's been extremely warm.
It's been surprising the way how long the work has continued, because it may have crossed a month at this point. It's been several weeks, so there's a lot of.
I think you're going to get some bad comments. Feedback with you.
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah.
But we do have Randy Welch that I think if we have some feedback to provide to Randy at Duke Energy, I think he's always good to work with. And
the reality is we've seen it all over the county.
Yeah.
They're doing it all over, unfortunately. But it does tend to hit just a little bit harder when it's right in the middle of our beautiful downtown. So, questions for Mr. Franzese? Well,
Mayor, if it's okay, what I'd like to do is pass this around, and it is, as I noted, a draft list of topics that staff has put together for us to look at in March at the planning session. Great. And so we are planning a two-part planning session on March 9th and 10th, with the kickoff on the 9th being an extension of our pre-agenda meeting where we'll have a community engagement opportunity. And we envision something similar to what happened at North Rowan High School in 2020, with elected officials and staff paired up at stations around the room and allowing attendees to give feedback on topics. But the difference now is we do have a set of goals and outcomes we've been working on over the last 3 years. And we think that after having an opportunity to visit these stations, that it would be good for attendees to indicate their perspective on whether we've accomplished outcomes to a high level, a satisfactory level, or an unsatisfactory level, and compare that to staff's take and have a conversation if there's how things may or may not be aligned from those perspectives, and then use that to build an agenda on the 10th that helps us delve a little deeper into those topics, and also have a variety of staff presentations. We are working with the team at Fountainworks on this, which is the group that the town used 3 years ago. We have a call planned for tomorrow afternoon to talk with them about this and start building out an agenda. But you have before you a list of 6 topics so far that staff has recommended we talk with you about: a financial update and early analysis of revaluation. In the planning area, talking about potential rezoning concepts to accommodate future residential and commercial growth, a CDBG update, a update from Public Works on our transition to automated garbage collection and how we can redeploy our staff once that transition is complete. From police, an update on community needs and how a special team can work towards overall community safety and engagement. And from fire, in conjunction with the architects we're working with on the station expansion project, we'll actually have a presentation on some conceptual floor plan options and a decision point for the board to give some feedback and help that process continue. And so don't need any immediate feedback right now, but if there is any, we'll take it. But if you want to marinate on that for a few days and let us know this week, if there are other topics that you want us to be sure to include, we can start building all the resources necessary for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Franzese. Anything on that from the board tonight?
I have one thing, and again, it goes back to communications. I think we need to take another look, not necessarily at our newsletter, but also our website. Our website has been there now, but it hasn't changed much, and I'd like to see it. In terms of the title page, maybe changing out some images and giving it a fresher look. I know some of the things that we discussed in terms of the events and the buttons that are necessary to find that. I think it's still a little bit difficult to navigate sometimes. So that might be something that maybe we could either pull in Nora Davis or have them make some recommendations.
Yeah, so you're talking really kind of a community outreach and publicity.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a disconnect between the public and what we're doing. And that, as Steve pointed out, he sent out direct mail pieces and didn't get any response. But we still have to keep hammering, and we still have to put the information out there. And when we got started with this thing, I mean, the website was a disaster, and we've made drastic improvements. But I'm always thinking that it can be improved, make it a little bit easier to navigate, especially for the older adults in this community. And maybe we can provide a class for residents that want to get savvy about our website. So just invite them to maybe have a community meeting to get their input, like we did years ago. Something to consider.
Anything else on the board?
Just a quick, and it might be small, but perhaps part of planning and zoning, or I'm not sure maybe where to go, but that seems maybe the most likely place. But a quick blurb about where we are with our parks, and we just got something new, and folks may have questions about out front, and there's other places. I know just from talking with folks, I know that a lot of it, I know we talked about here about interest in the second floor library, and we did a big study with Benesh and all those things, but more on a practical basis. When might those things go? What people want to see? What's our timeline? That kind of thing. That might be good.
Be a good opportunity to bring Joe in and allow him to talk a little bit, because I think a lot of what maybe we need an update on is kind of how all the pieces fit together, when they fit together, and how all the funding works for those two. Good suggestion.
Will we have any feedback by that time from that core program? That's too close, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've accepted being a part of it.
Right.
That was our consent agenda tonight, and then they're going to start working. That process will be several months.
Okay.
So representing the park thing that Mr. Howe mentioned, could we make sure that we issue an invitation to people to help with that cleanup day and tell them what's going to be going on with that cemetery?
We actually have invited the folks involved with that to the community meeting on that Thursday or the Wednesday evening before.
Good.
The Thursday evening before. Thank you. We've invited them so that they can actually sit at the table and talk to folks about what they're going to be doing and recruit volunteers. All right. Anything else? All right. We might have to go to day 2.
There we go.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Franzese?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Board, we'll start with comments and requests from the board. We'll start with Mr. Miller.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As all of us know on the board, we have many outstanding employees that work for the town, and we kind of, from month to month, we kind of talk about each one. Tonight, I'm going to say something about a different one. As you know, tonight he dominated the talk. He talks a lot. It's our town manager, Mr. Blunt. Mr. Blunt is very thorough and very detailed in all his planning.
Hold on a minute. You called him town manager again. That's
sorry.
not the first time they've done that.
Town planner. Excuse me.
He just got a promotion.
Town planners. I'm sorry. I was looking at you.
Peter was sorry to have to tell you this way.
Sorry. You stole everything. All right, I'm talking about the town planner as far as that Mr. Blunt goes. Very detailed, very thorough about all his details. I know he does a lot of work. I know he enjoys doing this work. I know talking to him, he goes out and deals with a lot of these contractors and developers. A lot of things changes. He always tries to work through all these details and makes a good compromise for all these people. And his job is for growth in Spencer, the right growth, and I appreciate everything he does. So instead of talking about Mr. Franzese, I'm talking about Mr. Blunt tonight. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Morgan?
Couple of things. I know we set out several years ago to update all of our zoning codes and things like that, so that we would be prepared for development. However, it's in my opinion, it's also a double-edged sword. I'm an old fart. Okay, I used to hunt and fish a lot of the areas in and around this area growing up as a kid, and a lot of those areas are no longer, I would say, woodlands anymore. I would hate to wake up one morning and stare out at nothing but row after row of manufacturing buildings and industrial buildings. When you drive down south of Concord, that's all you see on each side of the highway. I hope that in our desire to be progressive, in our desire to see things grow, that we also consider what we have and what we should hold dearly in terms of our natural resources. I would hate to think that the property that was just generously given to us turned out to be the only calm in the storm around us as building after building goes up unabated. I hope that the people involved, the developers, the property owners, will see the value in keeping Spencer, again, the small community that it is. That's why I chose to remain here. I did not want to live in Charlotte, and you've heard me say this before. I didn't want to live like a sardine. I hope that, again, that there's wisdom in the growth that's coming their way, that we don't roll over and slather at the prospect of progress when progress could turn right around and bash us in the head. That being said, I think as we move forward with the events that we have put in place here within the town, that we, again, as I've said earlier, that we still make the effort to communicate with our community in trying to better Spencer, to improve the quality of life here, and get more and more of our citizens involved. The demographics of Spencer have changed drastically over the last 50 years, and a lot of the neighbors don't know each other. And I think that as we do things like Winterfest, that we also, we're enjoying the fact that we've grown so much that we're running out of space ourselves. I hope that we take a serious look at buildings that come up for sale, or property that comes up for sale, that we look at those, maybe task staff to look at those and see if they would be viable for our public works or our fire department or our police department or whatever, storage, that can be used for storage facilities for any and all events that come up in the future. So again, I look at this with a viewpoint of knowing what this area used to look like many years ago, and with almost a sense of dread of what it's going to look like 20 or 30 years from now. I hope that it's a happy medium that we can sort of work our way through.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Howe?
Absolutely. Two things. First, to Mr. Bishop and the Yadkin Museum Historical Foundation, Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a phenomenal gift to town, to our residents, to our area. I know from being over there, the folks in Davidson County are excited about our partnership with what they're trying to do. And so, if you're listening to this and you don't know the impact that property, both specifically and more generally that area over there has in the last 500 or 600 years of history, man, do we have a lot to tell you, because there's a lot I've learned in the last couple of years about what's going on over there. So this is just a tremendous opportunity for our town and our region to learn some things about stuff that doesn't show up in the history books with North Carolina, and I think that's really cool. Briefly, second, and somewhat related, and piggybacking on what Mr. Morgan said, smart growth I think is important. Obviously, something we've been talking about a lot. We don't want to be some of the more tightly fit communities to our south, but at the same time, like what we did tonight. It sounds silly to say at the ripe old age of 37, but I don't think I ever thought 10 years ago that we would be having this conversation of a 1 million square foot facility coming to Spencer, and the impact that's going to have on our ability to deliver for our residents. I know there's some apprehension. I know folks outside of our town see us growing and they get scared about that. Perhaps I understand that the apprehension is real. I get it. But at the same time, what this will mean for not only Spencer, but for the northern Rowan area, which has been ignored by most of Rowan County for the last 50 years, it cannot be stated enough. So kudos to our staff and our folks who are helping do this. If you're out there and you're listening and you want to come to Spencer, come on. We'll find a spot for you. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Howe. Ms. Sledge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to comment on just a couple of things. The Quality of Life Award that was presented to us, and you may have seen that in the, some information about it in the paper. The mayor just set it up on top of the dais there. That was an award from Central Lina Council for our application and entry that went in about the Yadkin River Trail. And I'm really happy that I was able to be there as one of the recipients when it was awarded last week. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I've been asked to be a participant in a seminar the early March with the local government federal credit union. And for any of you who are members or anybody out there who is members, local government federal credit union has been administered by the state employees credit union since its existence, and they're about to spin that off to be a separate entity, not administered by state employees any longer. And the purpose of the seminar is to get some feedback and to see what we feel that services might be needed or how they might differ from what's being done now with state employees. So if you have anything that you'd like to say, please contact me or Peter or our new town clerk and to voice any information or opinions that you might have that I can take back to this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Muhammad.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank all the residents that are present and the ones that left as well, and those that are viewing for taking time out your busy schedule to see what's going on. Excited about all the growth, the expansion with business, and hopefully with new homeowners to come to this town. And thankful for all the work that this board, as well as the department heads and the staff, are doing as well. And to piggyback off of earlier, Mayor Pro Tem, you stated about the students with the exceptional, from the schools. Now the student DJ, I was so excited to hear that he's also an athlete. Not only is he an exceptional student, he's an exceptional athlete. He plays down at the HB Golf Park. He plays baseball down there, and I actually coached him this past year. And also noticed he also is a basketball player. He plays with the rec league over there. So he is a not just exceptional in the classroom, he's an exceptional athlete. So that was good to hear that. Also too, just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Bishop and the foundation for granting that. I'm very excited about that part of Brooklyn expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm just real happy to see what has happened in my lifetime in Spencer. I've lived here my whole life, and in Yadkin, I used to play there. And we traveled all around that place, and I'm just thrilled about the a gift of that area for a park. And as a history teacher, I taught all about that area down there. And so it's just, there's so much history there that it's going to be so beneficial for not only visitors, but also Rowan Countyans. And I think Mr. Miller is taking a Rowan County history course right now. So we are the oldest western county uh, in the state, and at one time we went all the way to California. So there's a lot to learn about Rowan County history. And I'm also thrilled about the cemetery getting some attention because I was very aware of that cemetery and also the one that's close to the railroad tracks as I was growing up because we would often go there just to wander in it and look at it, never disrespectfully, but to know that that's going to be brought to fruition and people are going to be able to visit it. I just think it's wonderful, and my hat's off for that partnership. I like to see more of that. And I want to give a shout out to our librarian because she really does a lot of extra things. We get a lot of bang for the buck there. She talked to me about the Harlem Renaissance program that she was doing, and it's going to be outstanding. And every month it seems like she pulls something together and makes that building very relevant and very used, and I appreciate that. But I'm just very proud of it. And I think someone said I never thought we would be here at this time. And I mean, when I first came on the board, when I just think of everything that's happened since then, it's mind-boggling. But I think we're headed in the right direction. And thanks for your leadership and thanks for yours.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I have just a few announcements. One is an exciting announcement that the addition of the Standback Forest, the doubling of that, looks like it is about to become a reality on paper. It looks like they're finalizing all of the paperwork and everything they need to transfer that property from the land trust to the town of Spencer. And so they reached out today looking to start talking with staff about scheduling a ribbon cutting. Looks like that will be late March to early April, so that's exciting. To add to that, I want to circle back to Mr. Morgan's comments because I think he's spot on. In order to have this grand vision of a model town for all of North Carolina, we've got to hold true to our values and hold true to our history, and that has been a small town where people know one another and people like to live, work, and play. And I think the reality is, over the years, we've gotten maybe a little away from the where people like to work and play. People live here, but I think a lot of the things we're doing are really trying to get folks create jobs, and a lot of what we're talking about now are going to create lots of jobs, not just for Spencer, but for all of Rowan County, especially the northern part and Big Green Nation. But the other piece of that is we are investing as a town in a lot of different things, parks, green space, wooded areas that help do a few things. They help make it a place where people want to live and play, but they also help make it a place where we are preserving parts of nature that in a lot of places they are not. And so I am absolutely with you that as we move forward with development and growth, that we're doing so thoughtfully, and we're doing so making sure that we're integrating green space and wooded areas, preserving those areas and integrating them so that this new development, it all looks seamless, right? That it looks like it and feels like it goes together. I think that's the challenge that we have. It's probably less of a challenge, but an opportunity that we're incredibly blessed with right now. And so what I kind of focus back on is the word balance, because that's really what we want to achieve, is balance in how we grow. The other thing I want to point out on the cemetery, this is a fact that I think is just incredibly awesome. That cemetery is actually the site of the first African-American doctor in North Carolina. And that's pretty amazing. What's more amazing is we're in Black History Month that we start to think about that. That was in a time where he was not allowed to practice. He was trained by a university, It was a doctor, but he was not allowed to practice and have his own office here in Rowan County. And so instead, he served the community. And so he would go to houses and do that. And so while he didn't have a formal shop per se, he served his peers and served citizens of the area. So pretty amazing story. Those are the type of stories I think that in renewing the cemetery, we get to bring life to some of those untold stories or those forgotten stories that are part of our history. So that's exciting. The only other thing I will note is that for our board, it is hard to believe it, but we have come up on our annual review for our town manager. That time has come around again. And so if it is the pleasure of the board, I would like to hold that review the evening of our March general board meeting. We'll do that in executive session that month. And so if it's agreeable with the board to do that, I will plan to send out all the paperwork and everything ahead of time so that you can begin working on that. I will get that out to you this week to have plenty of time to put that together. And I'll need that in advance then so that I can compile all the information. Mr. Franzese, I think we talked. That works for you, right? Okay. Does that work for the rest of the board? All right. With that, I do not have anything else. Again, I think big thank yous go all around to folks donating property, to folks working on new property for the town of Spencer, and for our staff and all that they do. So thank you all very much. We have reached the end of our agenda unless there is a need to go into executive session. All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Morgan, second by Mr. Muhammad. All in favor? All opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you all.